Taoiseach, in a week where the cruel impact on ordinary people of the deficiencies in our health service was exposed by the RT Investigates programme, we learned that hospital waiting lists are still actually getting worse. In response to Monday's programme, we've had lots of empathy, lots of very eloquent words from the Minister for Health, and I don't doubt his sincerity. But what we really need is decisive action that makes a tangible difference to the people who are affected. The latest hospital waiting lists for January are staggering. Over 632,000 people are on a waiting list of some form or another. That's 13% of our population. More than 1 in 8 people in the country are now on a waiting list. This indeed is truly shocking, extraordinary and frightening. Nurses and midwives have decided to engage in industrial action, Taoiseach, because they have lost faith in the ability of government and the HSE to deal with the acute nursing shortages across our health service. It is clear that nurses and midwives do not want to engage in industrial action. It's not what they're about. They want to be at work providing the best service that they can for the patients that they serve. But it has been evident for quite some time that nurses and midwives are deeply frustrated with the environment in which they have to work. They say it is unsafe for themselves, for the patients they serve, and indeed for other health professionals as well. And the kernel of this dispute lies in staffing, recruitment and retention, and in truth, it has been brewing for quite some time. Now, I acknowledge there have been efforts by the Government and the HSE to recruit more nurses and midwives, but with very little success, it has to be said. Taoiseach, a shortage of nurses and midwives hurts. It's not victimless. The shortage of nurses means that operations get cancelled. Last year, we know 37,000 operations got cancelled, up over 50% from the previous year. The shortage of nurses means that acute beds cannot be filled. And even today, over 100 acute beds in our hospital system cannot be filled, while at the same time people are lying on hospital trolleys. The shortage of nurses means, in essence, that patients are not being served in the way that they should. The goodwill of nurses and midwives has helped to keep the system chugging along, but they've had enough, and indeed, who can blame them? So, Taoiseach, what we need to know this afternoon is what the Government's plan is now to deal with imminent industrial action by nurses and midwives. What reassurance can you give to patients right throughout the country that the situation is not going to get worse? They are frightened by what is being revealed about the current state of our health service, especially around waiting lists, hospital trolleys and so on. And now they learn of this industrial action, which of course has the potential to make it worse, but it's happening because nurses have simply had enough. And we need a reassurance from you as to what the Government is going to do to prevent this industrial action, which is now only less than 4 weeks away.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy McGrath. Well, the first point I would make is that I agree with you that the threat of industrial action is not victimless, that people would suffer if we were at that point, undoubtedly, and it's certainly something that the Government, and I'm sure every member of this House, would want to avoid. Do not want to be in that place. And I do share the deep disappointment of both Ministers Harris and Donoghue when they heard the outcome of the INMO Executive Committee meeting the other night. The central point under discussion, and I do want to put on the record of the Dáil that huge efforts have been made to resolve this issue by everybody, by all sides, HSE, the Department, INMO. Unfortunately, we still have a situation where that announcement was put forward and the INMO rejected the proposals. But every effort was made to try and reach agreement, and I want to make some points about that potential agreement. But let me go back to saying that the Minister, the HSE, the INMO, indeed, everybody recognises the challenges of recruiting and retaining nurses within the public health system. Now, it's no consolation to say to patients in this country and those who use our services that this is an international problem. But the truth is that almost every public health service in the world is having the same difficulties in terms of attracting nurses to public health services. And it is an enormous challenge, but it is one we are determined to meet. And the initiatives that were put forward at the discussions included a commitment. You asked me what the government's going to do. What was put forward included a commitment to substantially increasing the nursery and midwifery force in 2017, with 1,208 additional funded posts coming on stream, offering all graduate nurses and midwives full-time contracts, a career break scheme, 130 additional undergraduate places in 2017, and to offering nurses and midwives and improved educational opportunities and career pathways. Obviously, that wasn't felt to be enough, but all of those initiatives were put forward during the discussions. Now, the next step, of course, is that there is a meeting this afternoon of the oversight, the Lansdowne Oversight Group, and I would encourage everybody to make every effort to come to an agreement in relation to the issues on the table, which I have outlined. It's very clear that people have to engage seriously about this. There is time, as you say. The threatened action is a number of weeks away. I would encourage everyone to get involved in those talks. The HSE and the department remain open to detailed discussion to resolve the dispute, so that we don't arrive at a point where, as you say rightly, that patients would suffer.
Taoiseach, well, can you give a commitment today that meaningful engagement will actually take place between the Government, the HSE and the INMO? Because I don't believe that the Lansdowne Road Oversight Group is going to be the forum for resolving this issue. You outlined what's in the document that was put forward by the HSE and the Government, but it's been rejected. I didn't say that the industrial action is not victimless. I said the shortage of nurses and midwives is not victimless. And that is what is at the root cause of this dispute. And until government recognises that, then we're not on the way to resolving this issue. Now, the Minister has said that 1,200 nurses will be recruited over the course of this year. But nobody believes that that will actually be delivered. And that's the problem, Taoiseach. The nurses and midwives have heard it all before, and there is a litany of broken promises, from ending the scandal of people lying on trolleys, cutting hospital waiting lists, bringing in universal health insurance, from 3 successive Fine Gael health ministers now in the last number of years.
Thank you, Deputy.
And we're not seeing progress on these issues, and nurses are frustrated. And the decision to take industrial action is born out of that frustration. They see no other way of resolving the issue. So there has to be meaningful engagement. There has to be a genuine commitment on the part of government now to deal with the underlying reasons for this industrial dispute.
If you're looking for a reassurance that absolutely every effort will be made and that there is an absolute agreement that serious engagement will continue from the point of view of the HSE and indeed the Department and the Minister with the INMO, you have that reassurance. Every effort will be made to come to an agreement in relation to these very important issues. I suppose when we're focusing on the problems in the health service, we tend not to really pay tribute to the extraordinary work that is done for so many patients and the extraordinary successes we have seen in our health service. And I think it's worth just making that point, because huge efforts are made by doctors and nurses. People do get excellent treatment. But clearly the issue of recruiting and retaining is extremely difficult. There have been, as you know, open recruitment periods, and the recruitment remains open and continuous, every effort being made to attract new staff. And it is worth noting that since December 13, numbers of staff in the whole area have increased by 1,657.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
So we have had that increase, but certainly the extra $1 billion that's gone into the health service in relation to a range of issues is having impact, but there is more work to be done. But as the Minister has said, it is also about changing the GP contract so that more people can get better services in the community, and it is also about looking at that bed capacity review. No new hospitals have been built since 1988, and we need to change that.